The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
It's another edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. We welcome everyone into what will be a great 1-hour broadcast, JDoc. Sometimes I feel as though I sound so repetitive when I begin the broadcast because every week when we get the opportunity to produce new content, it is educational. It, I think, answers questions that the public are asking themselves and they don't know where to find the answers. And I think it also provides clarity for people through our process. So I don't mean to be repetitive, but even with our guest today, we've got a great 1-hour show planned for everybody listening in and tuning in to be part of the Labor and Energy Show.
So Joe, listen, it's amazing because general public, and we are part of that general public. You hope they're asking these questions. They get bombarded so much with, specific, types of information. And so these questions that come up during our shows, these are questions we bring on the experts. And today's guest, Brian Gitt, who's an author, and he's the author of In the Dark, Fixing Energy Policies That Hurt People and the Planet. Now, the amazing thing about Brian is he's an environmentalist. You're talking about somebody who dedicated his entire life, to the environment, to green energy. He's an entrepreneur, and in the process, in his travels in his entrepreneurial life, and as a consultant, and I don't think he was intentionally doing this, but he was trying to find out the benefits of, that we were going to get utilizing specific types of renewables over fossil fuels, and the information that, he was studying and that he was going to present to the public wasn't making sense. So you're talking about somebody who is totally dedicated to, our planet, to lowering emissions, but started to do, obviously research, and it was in the middle of a project and learned a lot. Now, what's amazing about Brian, and we had the opportunity to meet him. He's very good friends with Robert Bryce, who's been on the show many times, is that Brian could have literally wrote our mission for the Energy Education and Awareness Initiative and our Labor and Energy Initiative and our alliance. We're going to get to talk to him not only about his book, but the fact that he had it's common sense in energy is what he preaches, and utilizing all areas, all types of energy to lower our emissions, to utilize everything, a balanced approach, which is exactly what we talk about. We're environmentalists. We all care about the environment, but obviously we have to come up with solutions that don't cripple us in the process. And Brian Gitt is going to provide some incredible information on those discussions.
Yeah, I think the beauty of this, and I think the reason more and more people are downloading the podcast version of the Labor and Energy Show, more and more people are tuning in on a weekly basis across the Jacob Network in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, Ohio, West Virginia. The reason they're tuning in is because the information is real, and relevant. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm saying it as a consumer of the content that we're creating on the Labor and Energy Show. So after the commercial break, you and Brian will do segment 2 and segment 3. Well, I'll be sitting right here as a listener, learning and educating myself from Brian's perspective. And that's the beauty of what the Labor and Energy Show is. So a note to the listeners and to the viewers, go to Apple or Spotify, search Labor and Energy Show, and you'll be able to download today's podcast. You'll be able to download the Rolodex or the library of shows as we enter into, I guess we're in our 3rd year now, JDoc, of the Labor and Energy Show. And we will continue the educational platform for the public.
Absolutely, Joe. I can't wait to bring Brian into the screen and to have a great conversation. There's so much in common. People want this and need this information so they can make, and that goes for me and you, educated decisions. Okay, inform educated opinions. And a lot of the things that we're doing right now, and by the way, these things are going on, can be very impacting and will be unbelievably impacting to each and every one of us.
We'll get to a commercial break. On the other side of the break, JDoc and Brian Gitt. Back in a moment.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a 3rd generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show on the Jacob Media Network. I'm ecstatic to bring in to the program Brian Gitt, author of In the Dark. Brian, and when I say in the dark, it's in the dark, fixing energy policies that hurt people and the planet. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks, JDoc. I'm a big fan of the show, so it's a real pleasure to actually have this conversation today.
Well, we really appreciate it. And I had said to you, and I shout out to Brendan Williams for putting this together and talking about yourself for literally months and months. And so finally, we're so happy to get the opportunity. Let me just kind of reiterate a little bit about what I said at the beginning to Krausey. So want to take a little bit of time to introduce Brian. And again, he's the author of In the Dark, Fixing Energy Policies That Hurt People and the Planet. Your background is really interesting because you've long advocated for renewables, okay? And in the process of your consulting career and your entrepreneurial career, you came to some realizations of why we need more of an all-of-the-above energy strategy to first and foremost make energy reliable, affordable, and available. So I kind of want, if you would, to walk our audience a little through that journey.
My journey started when I was a teenager, and I fell in love with the outdoors. And so I spent a ton of time backpacking and rock climbing and whitewater rafting, all of those kind of things. And I did it so much that I decided I wanted to lead outdoor trips for teenagers. And so we would go for 40 days in Alaska and take these kids from LA or New York or these urban areas that had never even slept in a sleeping bag or a tent. And then I had them with my co-leader for 40 days in Alaska. And we'd do rafting, sea kayaking, backpacking, ice climbing, all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, when you spend a lot of time in nature, you get to really appreciate it. And I just fell in love with the wilderness, to be honest. I love
You want to protect it.
Yeah, and exactly. And that was my motivation. And so after having these experiences led me to, it built this ethos within me that, hey, I want to do something meaningful with my life to protect these beautiful areas that I love. And I love sharing with kids and educating them about it. So as I started thinking about that and learning more and educating myself, it became obvious that energy and the built environment in terms of our homes and our buildings or our factories and how we use energy is so central to our impact on our broader environment. Not a big newsflash for most of the people listening. But you know, when I was young and impressionable, this was really my passion. I'm not understating this. This was, I mean, my 100% focus and passion, part of my identity. I identified as an environmentalist. This was really core to who I was. And I can remember sitting in a small little lecture hall in northern Arizona, and the speaker that was lecturing that day, his name was Amory Lovins. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but he's very famous and well known in the energy efficiency and renewable energy world. And he was giving this talk, and he basically said, more energy from the sun hits the Earth's surface in 1 hour than the entire Earth, all the people on Earth consume in an entire year. And when I heard this just blew my mind. I was like, wow, that is crazy. I mean, and that really opened my eyes. And that, along with these several other events, led me to dedicate basically the next 20 years of my professional career to promoting energy efficiency, renewable energy, electric vehicles, all of these technologies that I thought were the solution to protecting our environment and cutting emissions. And most of that time, I worked in California. I'm actually, right now, I'm sitting in California because I live here. And I've lived here for over 20 years. And I've worked with all of the big utilities. I've worked with the state agencies, with the local governments. I've worked in all kinds of consulting projects. We ran energy efficiency programs for utilities. I've been inside the belly of the beast. I've been in those rooms when these big, bold goals were set. I've been in those rooms when these programs were designed. We helped design what is called Energy Upgrade California today, which is one of the main statewide programs to promote clean energy and energy efficiency. So I understand this. And to be quite honest, most of the people I worked with are very well-intentioned, well-meaning people. They're not trying to do harm. They're not trying to hurt people. These people were like me. They were mission-driven. They wanted to make a difference. They want to contribute to something bigger than themselves, and they want to help people and help the environment. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. And I had multiple experiences that cracks started to show in my belief system and what was actually effective versus what was my ideology.
I would say this, and that I can't wait to hear about that. You talk about your background as an environmentalist. And I think you'll agree. You're as much or more of an environmentalist now, and everything that you believe in is based on, okay, there's a lot of different areas, security and making sure that we have the right information. But this is all based on your love for the environment and the planet, and to make sure that people are educated so that we don't continue to go down only one path. Okay, talk about, if you would, okay, in a sense, that those moments where you started to, because it's very interesting. You're putting together a project, okay, that will help benefit people and understand how renewables positively impact us and all that. But the information you're getting back is not adding up, okay? And so talk about that and talk about that moment of like, oh boy, this is going to take more of a, a multiple, type situation for us to be able to deal with this, not just going, dealing with renewables and solar and the like. Talk about when those realizations came to you, those moments of clarity.
The first crack in my belief system started to emerge in and around 2009, 2010. And what happened was my firm, I was the CEO of a clean energy consulting firm, and we won a $60 million contract to work with local governments, the state utilities, and the state of California to help design, manage, and implement this program called Energy Upgrade California to make homes more energy efficient, to make commercial buildings more energy efficient. And we had all of the tools you could possibly imagine, all the buy-in. We had the buy-in of the state, the local governments, the utilities, the contractors, the builders, all of them were participating in this program. And we had new financing tools. We'd offer really low interest loans to fund these things. We had tons of rebate money to upgrade the heating and air conditioning system in your home, or your windows, or your various appliances, all of these upgrades to your home. We had all of the support, again, of all of these stakeholders, and yet more money that we could even spend, and yet the program did not live up to its expectations. This whole thing was designed, again, remember the time period. This was the housing crisis. This was the financial meltdown. The Obama administration had pumped billions of dollars into the energy sector to put people back to work. That was the point of the program initially, was, hey, we need to get people back to work. We need to also make our homes and businesses more energy efficient. Let's combine those and create programs to get people back in upgrading, weatherizing, improving, upgrading the heating and air conditioning systems of all these homes. That was the idea. Well, even with all that money and all of those tools and all that support, it did not meet expectations. It was not successful. And I could not keep the blinders on my eyes and just pretend and smile. And quite frankly, we were making a ton of money. Our company was doing really well. And this is one thing that is always ironic. People will always sometimes, I'm very pro hydrocarbons. I'm very pro nuclear. And people will say, oh, you're just getting paid off. Somehow you're in the pockets of the fossil fuel industry, which is ironic because I work in the nuclear industry. But beyond that, it's so crazy because I was making more money than I've ever made in my life. Our firm went from 15 people to 50 people overnight. We opened a new office in LA. We were riding the subsidy gravy train and all of this federal funding. So we were making lots of money. So I had all the financial incentive to say, hey, this program's great. Let's keep it going. But again, it wasn't my mission. My mission was not just to make money. Of course I want to make money, but my mission was to protect the environment and to design programs that would reduce emissions and increase the reliability, resilience, and prosperity of the community. So with that was one of the first cracks that started to show. And this issue is broader. I mean, when we step back for a second, what is energy? Right? What is it? Well, if you crack open a physics textbook, it's going to say energy is the capacity to do work. Now, that's true, obviously, but I have a clearer definition that expands upon this and reframes this. Energy is freedom. It's freedom from cold. It's freedom of movement. It's freedom from darkness. Everything that in our lives, all of the modern convenience, us having this conversation right now using the internet is enabled by freedom of energy use, right? And it's one thing for us to talk about it in California where we're wealthy here. I mean, as things go in the world, but not everyone in the world is so wealthy, right? Most of the world isn't. Out of the 8 billion people on the planet, 1 billion of them have a relatively high level of living, but 7 billion don't. And, I think it's mind-boggling to me, if energy is freedom, how institutions, elite institutions and world leaders can impose and restrict, like the World Bank. I'll give you two examples. The World Bank right now is restricting development of thermal power plants that use fossil fuels in low-income countries in parts of continents like Africa, right? Now, those same leaders, over 80% of everything in their life is enabled by fossil fuels, hydrocarbons, right? And yet they're wanting to restrict developments of pipelines and power plants and infrastructure for those countries. Now, to me, that's immoral. If energy is freedom, then choking off people's access to reliable, affordable energy is immoral in my mind. There's no other way to say it. And this, you don't have to go to Africa for this. This is right here at home. A few weeks ago, the EPA in the United States just adopted a new power plant rule. Now, this rule is going to force the majority of the thermal power plants that are reliant on hydrocarbons into premature retirement. 16% of all the power in the United States right now comes from coal plants. Well, if by 2032, they don't announce their retirement and shut down or put carbon capture and storage on that plant, which will skyrocket the cost of doing that, then they're not gonna be able to operate, right?
Well, we had Rich Nolan on of the National Miners Association talking about that, the new rule, what's having this conversation is if you're familiar with our broadcast, and I want to make something clear, Brian. I said this to Brendan before the show, and Krausey kind of elaborated on it a little bit. Like, we're regular guys. I'm a labor Democrat, building trades guy, okay, and so I look at this entire conversation as an educational. And I don't always like the word educational because it makes it sound real sterile. But the fact is, these conversations, people like myself and everybody is a kitchen table environmentalist. We all naturally care about the environment. The information that we're getting thrown at us and the things that are going on are absolutely Twilight Zone-esque. So when I hear somebody like you who is, I'll say this. My impressions of you are that you care more about the environment now than you ever did in your entire life. You're just standing up and going, I guess, hold on for just 1 second before we put things in action, which we already are. I mean, we already have, including with the EV mandates and so many other things that we can't turn around. We're shutting. You mentioned the plants you're talking about. Once they go down the tubes, they ain't coming back. And so I really appreciate your conversation. Not going to lie, I get a little lump in my stomach because, this conversation that we're having is common sense as the day is long. Okay? But it's the minority conversation to say the least. So, elaborate if you would.
We are a runaway freight train right now, or speeding the cliff, whatever analogy you want to put on this. Anyone that has even a slight bit of common sense knows you don't shut down the life support system, which is our electrical grid. Our electrical grid is our life support system. It powers our hospitals, our emergency response, our industry. Everything that enables modern life is enabled by the power grid. You do not shut down power plants before you have a realistic and cost-effective way to replace them. That's just common sense. That you don't need to have any fancy studies or anything to know that that's just not smart policy to force things offline before you have something that can replace them.
Brian, so here you are in this space leading the movement, right? Walk into some things and educate yourself. I really appreciate your integrity because there's a lot of people out there that would say, I'm fighting, an uphill battle, and I'm just going to go with the money. I get a kick out of the fact that, anybody who when you're talking about some of the things you learn, well, you must be getting paid by somebody else. So there's always a way to kind of just discredit something. But what was the reaction? Okay, and what is the reaction? Because I'm looking at you like you have the ultimate courage. I think we share some of that courage, and sit there and try to educate people because we care about the environment. We've said, like you've said, we're for renewables. We're for electric vehicles. We just don't think there should be mandates because obviously there shouldn't be. And we think that this needs to be a balanced approach. What was the reaction from your community once you started raising the red flags and going, listen, guys, there's some things here we got to talk about?
Well, as I said before, I live in California, so you could imagine the reaction. Let's dig into California because it's a perfect example. There is no state in the U.S. that has put more time, more effort, and more money into developing clean energy policies, energy efficiency, all of these things, right? So there's a great blog post that just came out highlighting a study that was just done by the Energy Institute. This is at Berkeley, by the way, just to make sure that no one thinks this is some kind of right-wing think tank. This is the Haas School, Business School at Berkeley, the Energy Institute, put out this recent blog post highlighting a study that basically said in California, the rates have skyrocketed and soared so high that people that have put rooftop solar on their home, it is costing the rest of us, everyone else, $4 billion a year, not once, every year. It's costing $4 billion. Now you would say, well, how is that actually impacting people's lives? So the average family in California that doesn't have solar is paying $300 a year to subsidize the wealthier people that have put solar on their homes. Now, the reason I can say they're wealthier is indisputable because number one, to put solar on your home, you have to own your home first. Right. So we know the majority of homeowners are socioeconomically better off than the people that are not homeowners. But it's even more. It's hard to understate this problem. So in California, you have two basic worlds. You have people that live on the coasts where the weather is really nice, like where I live. I live right near San Francisco. I barely ever turn on my air conditioner. I think I turn on my air conditioner 3 or 4 times a year. Well, there's a whole nother class of people that live in the Central Valley, and it is 100 degrees, often over 100 degrees every day. Air conditioning is not a luxury. Air conditioning is a survival tool, right? And right now, all of these subsidies for solar, those $4 billion a year, we're forcing lower and middle income folks to basically pay more for air conditioning to survive because we're subsidizing people to put wealthier people to put solar panels on the roof.
Who can afford it?
Right.
Brian, let's do this. Let's take a quick break, okay? Because we're going to pay some bills and let's continue this fascinating conversation. We're going to have more from the Labor and Energy Show and our guest, Brian Gitt, in just a minute.
My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. As I'm getting older, I'd like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you. I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show here at Jacob Media Network. We're talking to Brian Gitt, who is the author of In the Dark, Fixing Energy Policies That Hurt People and the Planet. And, I can say this, Brian, because I'm looking at my interview and we're just touching the surface. All we're going to do is touch the surface on this. I would love, and we have a whole another segment to go, but I would love to do a series on this and make sure that we get everything out there, because like I said, what you're talking about is common sense and energy. You could have written a mission for what we're doing. We're environmentalists. We care about, we have labor and energy. So we have a number of individuals that are involved in everything. We support renewables, but there has to be a balanced approach to this. And what we're talking about and what you've uncovered is so important. So right now you're talking about in California, you're talking about solar energy and obviously the subsidies that only the rich can afford, but probably don't need because they're located in areas where, the weather is incredible. And a lot of the people, like here in Philadelphia, I did a show not long ago, okay? And it was one of our legal shows. And the guy that was on the program's name was Merv Haber. He's a real estate attorney, okay? And the show turned out to be about solar. Now, here's a guy that doesn't have an axe to grind, right? He's not, he doesn't think about it much. We all have an axe to grind, but the point is, he just started talking about clients that he represented and the cost to put solar panels on and the room you need in the development. And of course, you can't put them on specific types of homes, getting rid of them after 20 years. So it costs more than the subsidies, okay? And than the savings. And so these really basic common sense things, regular people, aren't getting this information. So if you would continue that, but I really do want to know what your, what the reaction has been. And since you have, gone on, been educated and started to say, hey, wait a second, we need a different solution here, to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
So utility rates in California have skyrocketed over the last 5 years. PG&E and SoCal Edison. So PG&E's rates have gone up 80% in the last 5 years. SoCal Edison's rates have gone up 90% in the last 5 years. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a huge increase. So why is this happening? If solar is so cheap, then why are the rates skyrocketing? Well, it turns out that it's not cheap because there's all of these system costs and fixed costs that you have. You got to build out all the transmission, distribution, and you got to maintain the grid, and you got to supplement all of these things. But this goes beyond solar. This taps into other policies that are getting enacted that you guys talk about a lot, mandating electric vehicles. So now, as the rates are skyrocketing, average cost of electricity, 40 cents a kilowatt hour in California. It's double the national average, double. Think about that. We're paying twice as much for energy in a place, especially in a coastal part, that's relatively temperate, right? We don't have extreme weather. So at least on the coastal areas. So now they're going to mandate electric vehicles. So today, if you drive an electric car versus a gas car, you pretty much pay the same. You don't actually save money by going with an electric car. I'm not talking about the cost, because obviously it costs more. I'm talking about just the operations. To charge your car versus to buy a gallon of gas is more or less equivalent because of the high rates. Now, this trend that I talked about is continuing to skyrocket, and it has no possibility of slowing down because now the state and the utilities want to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in additional transmission and distribution infrastructure. Well, who's going to pay for that? The utilities aren't charities. This gets passed on ultimately to the consumer, and it's going to break the back and crush lower and middle income people that need to drive to work. How are they going to not only afford the more expensive electric vehicle, but now the utility, first of all, the circuits for everyone in your neighborhood to charge aren't designed big enough to charge all these cars. So that means the utility needs to upgrade the circuits and distribution system, which costs money, right? So who's going to pay for all of that, right? And so the cost of electricity is going to continue to rise. I don't see any, I wish it weren't the case, I don't see any other possible trajectory, and they're doubling down on these failed policies. It's pretty scary.
Well, when you look at the electric vehicle mandates, and what people don't realize is that legislation's happening right now, okay? Like literally right now. And the American public, everybody's for electric vehicles, right? I mean, even though I'm just being, why wouldn't you, right? But you throw that little word mandate on it, probably go out to every one of my neighbors and say, hey, tell me if you know what an electric vehicle mandate is. So we're all involved in the 17 states, I think, are involved in the California rule. When you think about the critical minerals, okay? We've had Siddharth Kara on the show. You talk about going overseas into the Congo and seeing the kids, the child slave labor that's going on there, right? Let's look at some of the issues that are attached to all this, okay? Permitting reform. So even if we wanted to take it over, we literally couldn't in many cases, because it takes forever to get a permit for an energy project. And you look at even our auto industry, the manufacturers are losing so much on the construction of an electric vehicle. So there are so many things that, in a sense, don't make sense. But we're not only doing that, but, and you look at some of the states. So we've done shows on with New Jersey Car. That's the organization that represents the automobile, where you buy your car, right? And they're going to potentially go out of business. But what's interesting about it is you could just go right next door to another state, okay, and go do that and go buy that. We're going to lose investment in our refineries. I mean, the trickle down effect of this stuff is so unbelievable that I find that it's almost like, and I don't, telling the little kid not to touch the fire, right? But in other words, we're not going to learn until we literally burn our hand and put ourselves in an incredibly bad way. One of the things I was watching one of your videos, and you talk about considering all the costs and the benefits of all of our energy sources: wind, solar, oil, coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Okay, as solutions. Okay, making sure that we have a well-balanced approach. Okay, not just like we can flick the switch. Okay, which we've been saying for a long time. And 5 principles in examining the best energy options to protect the planet and the people. Reliability. At least this is from one of your videos. Reliability, affordability, energy security, scalability, and land use. One of the things that was amazing when I was listening to your speech on land use, okay, and I can't imagine, the wind turbines. If you would just mention that, in regards to the amount of land it takes for a refinery, and then for a solar wind farm, what are those comparisons?
So this week in China, the world's largest industrial solar project turned on. It's a 5 gigawatt capacity plant. It's massive, right? This plant sprawls and covers 200,000 acres of land. 200,000 acres of land for one solar plant. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see this comparison. Now I'm going to share with you, what if for that same 5 gigawatts of capacity, we used advanced nuclear power instead of that solar plant? How much land would that take up? 200 acres. 200 acres versus 200 200,000 acres. Now, this goes way beyond land, though. So I want you to really think about this. All of the materials intensity of a technology is directly attributed to its environmental impact. All of the heavy metals, all of the mining, all of the diesel fuel, all of the chemicals, all of the energy that went into basically blanketing 200,000 acres of land that, by the way, has to get ripped out and thrown away in about 20 years or so. In all that waste, how are you going to deal with all that waste? You've got toxic chemicals that you got to deal with, and solar panels make no sense to recycle because they're not cost effective to recycle them. So people talk about it as a theoretical concept, which is great, and we should if we can, but it's not cost effective. So when you're comparing the materials intensity, the land intensity, the waste produced from a 200,000 acre solar plant versus advanced nuclear. This technology, advanced nuclear, has been around since the 1950s. We know how to do it. It's not new technology. It's perfectly safe. It sits on a tiny footprint. It has no air emissions. It has zero CO2 emissions. It has the highest concentration of energy of any energy source, millions of times more than even hydrocarbons, right? And I'm a big fan of hydrocarbons, but nothing compares to the power, efficiency, and concentration of nuclear energy. And when we think about our history as a human civilization, our entire history over tens of thousands of years, everything has been a march, this arc of progress that we've experienced from when we first created fire to then we developed agriculture, and then we had our industrial revolution because of the steam engine, and now we're living in the data and information age. All of that has been moving from less concentrated source of energy to more concentrated sources of energy. And nuclear power is the future of energy. It is our destiny. There's no other way to say it. That doesn't mean hydrocarbons are going nowhere. We're going to use way more hydrocarbons in 2050 than we do today. And that's guaranteed when you just look at the trends that are happening in the developing world. And then when you look at the trends that are even happening here in the United States. For the last 2 decades, our power consumption was flat. Well, no longer. It is skyrocketing right now. We're going to triple, for example, data center energy use by 2030, just here in the US. So anyways, I think it's important. You bring up this point about we got to look holistically at these things. If you care about the environment, you can't support 200,000 acres of land in materials, in chemicals, in coal, and all the things that went into producing that.
Let me say one thing as you're saying that. I mean, how do fossil fuels impact those? Okay, what cools the turbines? Okay, I mean, people don't like we'd be sitting here and naked if it wasn't for fossil fuels. Like literally, people don't even know the fossil fuels that we use on a daily basis. Doesn't mean we can't get safer and more efficient in every way possible. By the way, as in the United States, we have the highest standards environmental on the planet. But so why wouldn't we shut ourselves down and let them run roughshod across the world? Okay, because last time I checked it, the environment covered the whole planet. Okay, so let's throw that in there. You're not like you mentioned solar panels. Okay, after 20 years, you got to do something with those solar panels. Okay, when you talk about the wind turbines, how much fossil fuel did it take to create them and to operate them and to cool them? So just wanted to throw that in there while you're talking about the 200,000 acres. Those aren't fossil fuel free.
Not at all. If I could distill my energy policy recommendation down to 3 words, here it is: use more energy. And that's going to be different in different places. So if you're in India, that means you're going to burn more coal for the foreseeable future until you have enough economic development to advance and progress to cleaner burning fuels. And the same thing with China. In the US, that means we got to use a lot more natural gas because we're going to have nuclear come along. But right now, natural gas is our really only hope to fund the manufacturing and industrial expansion that we need, all of the data center expansion that we need. So it's going to look differently. But ultimately, the number one thing you can do to protect the environment and to tell people is use more energy. And this pattern we've seen since the beginning of time. It enables everything we care about. In every country, when you look at their air quality, their water quality, all of the environmental and social metrics of what we would consider a healthy society, it gets better and better and better the more energy you use. So we should be doing, instead of this net zero by 2050, how about 250% more energy use by 2050? How about that? We're aiming at the completely wrong target. We have to have better metrics, better goals, and better vision.
So this conversation, we always talk about working together, okay? And we're having this. I'm an iron worker, regular guy. Took me, I told you when I'm doing Robert Bryce's shows, I'm up all night studying and waking Brendan Williams up saying, "What does this word mean?" Right? But I said to Brendan, the reason I even have the guts to have a conversation with somebody like yourself and Robert is because I'm talking on behalf, for the listener, okay? And often we look at ourselves, Kraus and I, as translators, okay? What is it going to take? Okay, first of all, this is a big question, okay? What's driving this? Okay, I'm, like I said, union iron worker, okay? And these things, just so you understand, this all started with me and Joe Kraus. We do the labor show in Philly and a number of other stuff, but, we had an issue at the PES refinery. There was a fire. There was one unit out of 33 that went down. Now, no one got hurt, thank God, 32 active units, and yet it was sold to the lowest bidder, okay? We started to go to our policymakers, and in labor, we have, we've worked real hard at our politics because, like they say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. But fact of the matter is, it was crickets. Yet we had environmentalists coming in, okay, from out of the city, from all, pushing hard against what we were doing. We couldn't get any reaction, and we're sitting there, we're going, "Whoa, what is going on here?" And so they sold it. We have a lot of policymakers that tell us the environmentalists who are spending unbelievable amounts of money just walk in the office and say, you're going to be looking for a job sooner than later. What is driving this, Brian? And I ask because if we all have a common motive, I don't see your commitment to the environment any different today than it was years ago. You just have been, educated. You're as passionate environmentalist as there is. You just understand that the solutions are not shutting ourselves down completely and dependent on 100% renewables and EV mandates and all those things that the grid, the operators of the grids are jumping up and down going, we're not going to be able to do this. So what's driving this? Because these are smart people too. I mean, I don't get it.
Our politicians, our corporate leaders, and investors have all adopted a false story about energy. That's the root cause. Now, we've seen this pattern before many times in history. In the 1950s, doctors used to recommend smoking is healthy, right? In the 90s, if you remember Snackwell's fat-free cookies, I love those little devil food cookies. I used to think that was healthy. I mean, the reality is we were pushing fat-free cookies, and what we ended up doing is convincing hundreds of millions of people to eat a high sugar diet that led to diabetes, right? And obesity, right? The same thing is happening today with energy. We have adopted a false story about energy. And that false story goes something like this. Fossil fuels need to be phased out. Fossil fuels are bad. And that wind, solar, and electric vehicles are the only thing that can save us and protect the planet. Now, this is just as fake and false story as it was that Snackwells are healthy for you or that cigarettes were healthy for you. There's no difference. These are obviously doctors in the 50s are smart people, right? It's about education and it's about a narrative. It all comes down to the narrative. And I understand this because I was this. I believe this, right? I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not saying these are bad people because I was one of them. I fully embraced this ideology and it was a part of my identity.
And Brian, we talk about changing the narrative all the time. And that's what this show is about. We only have a minute left. We have not touched the surface. But your book, okay? And it is an incredible book, okay? And it's an easy read, okay? And how can people get the book?
Go to briangitt.com, just my first and last name, BrianGitt.com. So let me just say one thing about the book. The only reason I tried to write the shortest possible distilled version of everything I've been learning over the last 20, 25 years in working in the energy sector. And I wanted to write it in really common, easy to understand language. And I wanted people to be able to read it in about an hour. And I don't make a single dollar. Actually, I subsidize the book, to be honest. First of all, you can read it for free electronically. And the cost of getting it is the cost of printing it and shipping it. We don't make a single dollar on it. The whole reason I wanted to get this out there is to educate more people. So when people go, like hopefully after someone goes and listens to this show today, they go home at dinner tonight, they talk to their husband or their wife or their kids, they go into work tomorrow and they share a new perspective and maybe something that they learned. And that's what I try to do, just distill what I've been learning and sharing it with as many people as possible. And books are high leverage because you can obviously, a lot of people can read it. So that's where they can go, briangitt.com, or they can follow me on, I guess now it's X, formerly Twitter, at Brian Gitt I try to share everything that I'm learning on a daily basis.
And well, first of all, I want to obviously thank you for doing the show, but also we haven't touched the surface. I mean, we have just barely touched it. Would love to, if you're interested, to do, kind of like a mini series on, a lot of these issues and breaking it down, including the book and going through, so many of the chapters. And so if you're open to that, we see massive benefit to the general public and to anybody, especially our policymakers, who cares about the environment, the planet, our energy, our security, as much as you do. So Brian Gitt, thank you so much for being our guest on the broadcast, man. Can't wait to do it again.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity, and this is a fun conversation.
Awesome. We're going to have more from the Labor and Energy Show in just a minute.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Special thanks, big salute to Brian Gitt, JDoc. Great interview, great conversation. And I hope everybody downloads the podcast of this broadcast, re-listens to it, and then goes online and reads his book. An amazing informational segment or show today on the Labor and Energy Show.
So Yeah, BrianGitt.com. The book is In the Dark, Fixing Energy Policies That Hurt People and the Planet. Okay, from somebody who's worked his whole life as an environmentalist, and and still has that mission. But really, you talk about common sense and energy, and somebody who is just looking at all the factors, looking at the.
I was just going to say that, JDoc. You talk about, or you use that word common sense a lot. I was just going to say to our listening audience and those viewing the show this week with your interview with Brian Gitt, if you just listen to the last 60-second synopsis from Brian, you will get a feel for what he's learned from what he's studied and experienced to what has led to his mission. Amazing stuff.
Oh my God! Like I said, we just touched the surface, and you look at some of the information that he provides. Okay, in China, by the way, I don't think they had a vote on this one. 200 square acres, 200,000 square acres of wind solar farm. Okay, imagine all the the plant life, all the trees, all the the green environment that had to be destroyed to put those wind turbines in. Okay, doesn't mean that we don't want wind turbines. It means that we need to work this thing together and come up with common sense solutions. Okay, and I think working together, we didn't get a chance to talk to Brian about a number of things. Working together and bringing these parties together. Okay, it's so much there, Joe. Can't wait to have Brian in again.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Again, you can download this episode or any episode of the Labor and Energy Show on Apple or Spotify. And we thank everyone for tuning in, and a special thanks to Brian Gitt for giving us the full hour today. On behalf of my partner, JDoc, I'm Joe Kraus. See you next time, everybody.
My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. And as I'm getting older, I would like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you.
I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.